Gemini, nothing will stop you after this news. Your revolution starts today. Today, something within you awakens, and it's not subtle. It's not a whisper. It's a deep, unmistakable knowing that your life is shifting in ways you can no longer postpone. You felt it building, restlessness in your chest, a spark behind your thoughts, an impulse to change. But now, it's no longer an inner murmur. It's a soul-wide revolution, and it begins now. You've lived long enough weighing the options, accommodating every perspective, allowing your radiant energy to be stretched thin, try and meet others where they are. But today, something changes. That version of you who hesitated, who deferred, who danced around your own power out of politeness or fear being too much, that version no longer fits. Because today, you're not becoming someone new. You're remembering who you were before the world asked you to shrink. You're stepping into clarity, direction, and fierce authenticity, and nothing will stop what's been set in motion. This isn't just about action. It's about alignment. You are stepping into your full voice, and with it, your ability to shape a future that matches the brilliance you've always held inside. If something in your soul feels stirred already, like this message was meant for you, pause, breathe it in, and if you feel called, share and subscribe to continue the sacred unfolding with me. Let's begin. Gate 1, the end of hesitation, the rise of inner command. Gemini, let's speak the truth that your soul has always known, but perhaps struggled to claim out loud. Your indecision was never because you didn't know what you wanted. It was because you knew too much. You saw every angle, felt every consequence, anticipated every emotional ripple, and somewhere in that vast awareness, you forgot that your knowing was already enough. But today, that dynamic begins to crumble. Today, you stop second-guessing the very clarity that has been trying to emerge within you. You've spent years seeking harmony, not just with people, but with possibilities. You've entertained both the what-ifs and the what-could-bes, all while delaying the most important truth. You were born to choose, to speak, to initiate. Your dual nature was never meant to paralyze you. It was meant to give you range, depth, dimension. But now, indecision has exhausted its usefulness. From this moment forward, clarity will no longer be something you stumble into. It will be something you stand in. This is your pivot point. Think of Maya, a Gemini woman whose life was defined by everyone else's timelines. She waited for a partner to get ready, her employer to recognize her efforts, and her family to understand her dream. One day, exhausted by her own mental loops, she stood in the middle of her kitchen and whispered, "I'm allowed to want what I want now." That small sentence rewrote everything. Within months, she relocated, started the creative studio she'd shelved for years, and attracted relationships that mirrored her new internal command. What changed wasn't her circumstances. It was her permission. Gemini, you are being asked to give yourself the same gift. You're being asked to end your reliance on external confirmation. No more surveying the crowd. No more asking the stars to speak louder. They've already spoken. You are the one who needs to listen now. The version of you who lingered in limbo, who constantly deferred, delayed, diluted, is being gracefully released. Not because they were wrong, but because their season is complete. You no longer need to hold every possibility open to be loved. You no longer need to perform mental gymnastics to earn belonging. The people meant for your next chapter will meet you in your decidedness, not your delay. There's a misconception that Gemini is flighty, flaky, scattered. But here's the truth. Your mind moves fast not because it lacks depth, but because it sees systems before others even recognize patterns. You're not confused. You're just multidimensional. And now that you know this, you can stop apologizing for it. Let's be honest. You stayed too long in jobs that underpaid your brilliance, in relationships where you carried both sides of conversation, in friendships where you were the emotional translator. And why? Because you were taught that speaking too soon, moving too fast, deciding too boldly made you too much. But Gemini, what if too much was just code for too alive for their comfort? This is your revolution. And it begins with the smallest yet most powerful internal shift. I no longer wait for permission to be who I already am. From here forward, you will notice something strange but beautiful. The more you commit to your clarity, the less drama finds you. The more direct you are, the more opportunities arrive. Your relationships simplify. Your body relaxes. Why? Because your energy is no longer tangled in indecision. It's focused, sharp, magnetic. There's power in the pivot. Gemini, the world around you may take a moment to adjust. They may ask, when did you become so decisive? Smile. You've always been decisive. You just finally stopped pretending to be unsure so they can feel comfortable. Clarity is not cruelty. Choosing yourself is not abandonment. This shift you're making isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clean. Clear energy, clear direction, clear voice. Let's talk about your voice for a moment. Your words are spells. You shape reality not just through what you say, but how you believe in what you say. When you speak from your center, things move. People respond. Doors open. And until now, you've tiptoed around that power. Fear it would make you too influential, too dominant, too dangerous. But let's reframe. What if your voice heals because it dares to tell the truth out loud? When you trust your voice, you become a lightning rod for change. And when you stop hiding your truth, you become a portal for other people's awakening, too. So what does this mean practically? It means you no longer need to ask 5 friends for their opinion before making a move. It means you don't need to wait for a sign to leave a situation that's already draining you. It means when your heart knows, you follow not later, but now. And when doubt tries to creep back in, you recognize it not as truth, but as an echo from a past you no longer belong to. Gemini, this is your pivot from mental overload to mental leadership, from talking in circles to speaking into creation, from being the mirror for others to becoming the source for yourself. And the most liberating truth of all, you don't need a plan to begin. You just need a decision. Make it now, make it real, and let the revolution unfold. Gate 2, the action that changes everything. Gemini, the decision has been made. The hesitation is behind you. Now comes the part that truly redefines your story. Aligned action, not scattered, not reactive, not born from urgency, but rooted in clarity. This is where everything changes, not because the world shifts, but because you do. And the moment you take that first step in truth, the universe begins to rearrange itself in your favor. You've been living with brilliant visions, ideas that lit up your imagination, dreams you rehearse in silence, longings you shelve for later. But later has expired. Now is all you have, and now is more than enough. For far too long, you told yourself that you needed to be ready, that you needed to figure everything out before you began. That clarity would arrive fully formed, with no risk, no discomfort, no ambiguity. But Gemini, clarity does not precede action, it follows it. Clarity isn't a prerequisite, it's a reward. Consider Nina, a Gemini who had always dreamed of writing a book. She journaled for years, saved voice notes, collected quotes, created outlines. But she never wrote a chapter. What if no one reads it? What if I get it wrong? One day, she realized the real fear wasn't failure. It was success. Because success would mean she could no longer hide behind potential. That day, she opened her laptop and wrote 1,200 imperfect words. Not because she was ready, but because she was done waiting. That book is now in print. And more importantly, she is now free. Or think of Elias, Gemini rising, working in a job that drained his creativity. He told himself the timing wasn't right to quit. But then one morning, during a regular commute, he whispered, "I'm allowed to choose joy." He didn't quit that day, but he signed up for a design course that night. One act, one shift, one brave move that created an entirely new timeline. Gemini, the actions that will define your new life aren't necessarily loud or grand. They are honest. They are aligned. They are the kind of decisions that bring your external world into resonance with your internal truth. You've always been gifted with vision, but now you are becoming the vessel of execution. And it doesn't matter if others don't understand your timing or your path. This part of your life isn't up for public consensus. It's an inner contract between you and the version of yourself you're becoming. This is where you learn to honor your impulses as sacred. The urge to move, to speak, to say no, to say yes, to begin, to walk away. The mind may ask, but what will happen if I do? The soul responds, what will happen if you don't? You no longer need to justify your choices to those who haven't done your healing. Your life is not a group project, and your fulfillment doesn't require a second opinion. Gemini, the world has tried to condition you to wait. Wait for clarity. Wait for approval. Wait for a sign. But you've already received the sign. It's in your restlessness, in your boredom, in your frustration, in the voice that keeps asking, is this all there is? And here's the truth. No, it's not all there is, but it's all there will ever be if you don't move. This next version of you doesn't perform potential. They embody progress. So what does action look like for you? Maybe it's writing the email you've avoided. Maybe it's blocking the number you swore you'd give one last chance. Maybe it's applying for the program you aren't ready for. Maybe it's canceling plans that no longer feel right. Maybe it's speaking the truth you've danced around for far too long. Not for attention, not for applause, but because your nervous system needs you to honor your knowing. The longer you delay aligned action, the more your body bears the burden of delay. The migraines, the fatigue, the emotional swings, these are not random. These are spiritual alarms ringing through your cells, asking you to stop betraying yourself with stillness. And when you begin to act, even in small ways, your body begins to heal. You sleep deeper, you laugh louder, you think clearer, because you're no longer carrying the weight of unexpressed momentum. Gemini, you weren't made to wait. You were made to respond, to life, to intuition, to energy. And when you trust your own rhythm, the path appears. Here's the beautiful secret of aligned action. It accelerates the right timeline. The moment you choose and favor your soul, the doors open. Not all at once, not always where you expect, but consistently and with grace. You might get a phone call that feels divinely timed, an invitation you didn't see coming, a cancellation that clears the space you didn't know you needed, a compliment that confirms what you quietly hoped was true. These are confirmations, not coincidences. This is the magic of your movement. You no longer need to be perfect to begin. You only need to begin, because the old life will not end on its own. It ends when you act as if you're no longer that version of yourself, and live accordingly. Gemini, you've been carrying dreams like seeds in your palm, waiting for the perfect soil, the perfect rain. But today, you are the soil. You are the rain. You are the sun. Plant them. Water them. Watch what grows when you stop doubting the power of your own becoming. The revolution has already begun. Gate 3, returning to your authentic frequency. Gemini, once a decision is made and action is set in motion, the most profound transformation begins. Not in your calendar, not in your relationships, but in your frequency, in the vibration that radiates silently from your body, your voice, your choices. That frequency used to be scattered, not because you were weak, but because you were wired to adapt. You bent yourself in 1,000 directions trying to stay liked, stay needed, stay relevant. But now, something deeper is stirring. You're no longer looking to fit. You're learning to resonate. You may begin to notice something strange. The things you used to tolerate now feel intolerable. The places you once felt invisible now feel suffocating. The people you once chased now seem distant, not in space, but in frequency. This isn't rejection. This is recalibration. Your authentic energy is rising, and not everyone, not everything will rise with it. But Gemini, please understand, this isn't loss. This is alignment. When you return to your natural frequency, some things must fall away, not because they were bad, but because they were tuned to the version of you that survived through pleasing, performing, or pretending. Think of Mateo, a Gemini who spent his 20s being everyone's emotional caretaker. He knew how to listen, how to make people feel seen, how to mediate conflict. But after years of being the safe one, he realized he had no space left for his own needs. So he began to shift. He said no without apology. He chose solitude over group chats. And almost overnight, half his social circle faded. At first, it felt like abandonment. But then, something miraculous happened. The right people began to arrive. Those who asked how he was, who listened without needing fixing, who loved him without performance. Mateo wasn't alone. He was finally matched. Or imagine Sienna, Gemini moon, and Venus. Her entire career was built around being likable. She styled her words carefully, crafted posts for applause, shaped herself for the algorithm of approval. But it left her hollow when she started creating content that actually expressed her weird, wild, visionary truth. Her old metrics dropped, but her fulfillment soared. Then, slowly, new opportunities emerged, ones that felt like soul matches, not popularity contests. Gemini, what these stories reveal is the core of your current portal. You're not here to be digestible. You're here to be true. You're not here to echo back what others want to hear. You're here to broadcast a new frequency, one that vibrates with freedom, curiosity, and self-trust. And here's what you must know. When you return to your authentic frequency, you won't just feel better, you'll heal. Your nervous system will begin to untangle itself. Your intuition will speak louder. Your creativity will return, because alignment regulates, authenticity nourishes, and truth doesn't just liberate, it restores. But yes, there will be friction. When you stop playing small, those who benefited from your silence will feel the shift. Some will say, "You've changed." Take that as confirmation. Say thank you, because change isn't the problem. Change is the proof. The discomfort you feel in this phase is natural. You're untethering from versions of yourself that once kept you safe. And safety, even when built on self-abandonment, can feel seductive. But Gemini, your safety net has become a cage, and your soul has outgrown it. This is a season of sacred subtraction, where silence replaces small talk, where stillness replaces chasing, where your solitude becomes a sanctuary, not because you hate people, but because you've stopped needing their validation to feel whole. You may find yourself revisiting old conversations in your mind, not with regret, but with new clarity. I should have spoken up. That moment was a sign. I knew better, but I stayed quiet. These memories aren't there to shame you. They're there to free you, because now you will speak. Now, you will choose differently. Now, you do trust what your body tells you. That's the gift of returning to your frequency. Your body becomes a tuning fork for truth. When someone's energy is off, you'll feel it instantly. When a space is nourishing, you'll relax without effort. When a decision is right, you won't need to overthink it. Your body will know, and your job is simply to listen. Gemini, your gift has always been range. But now, range is evolving into refinement. It's not about being everywhere. It's about being fully here. It's not about having every option. It's about choosing the one that resonates. It's not about connection at all costs. It's about connection with coherence. You're becoming more discerning, not from judgment, but from healing. And that healing doesn't close your heart. It clarifies it. So what does this phase look like? It looks like leaving the group text unread. It looks like rewriting your bio to reflect your real values. It looks like dancing in your kitchen to music no one else hears. It looks like sleeping deeply because you finally stopped negotiating your truth. It looks like lightness, ease, space. Gemini, you're not becoming harder. You're becoming clearer. And in that clarity, you become magnetic. Not because you're trying, but because you're real. This is the magic of resonance. You no longer hustle for connection. You attract it. You no longer beg for opportunity. You align with it. And the people who meet you here, they are your mirror, not your project. You're not too much. You're just too true for the masks you once wore. This is a season where your frequency sets a standard, and the world adjusts to meet you. Gate 4, designing a life that matches your truth. Gemini, now that you return to your authentic frequency, the question becomes, what kind of life honors this version of you? Not the you who compromises, not the you who shape-shifts to fit expectations, but the you who has reclaimed her voice, realigned with the center, and remembered their worth. It's time to build a life that doesn't just look good from the outside, but feels right from the inside. You've outgrown spaces that once felt like home. Why? Because they were constructed for a version of you that no longer exists. Now, you're being asked to become an architect of something entirely new, not a renovation, a rebuild, This starts with environment. What spaces make your body exhale? What rooms feel like invitations and not performances? What objects in your life reflect who you're becoming, not who you've been? Redesign isn't always about changing locations. It's about changing intention. Maybe you move your desk closer to the light. Maybe you clear your calendar of energy-draining commitments. Maybe you let go of the clothes, the photos, the shoulds that were tied to roles you no longer play. Every object, every hour, every interaction can either support your frequency or suppress it. Choose support. Next, relationships. This new season demands relational honesty. That means creating connections where silence doesn't mean suppression, where laughter isn't a mask, and where you're not constantly editing yourself to keep the peace. You've likely already seen the shift. Those who match your people-pleasing phase may start pulling away. That's not rejection. That's recalibration. They were attached to your mask, not your essence. And now that the mask is dissolved, only those aligned with your truth can stay. Let them go. Let them be. You are not abandoning them. You are simply no longer abandoning yourself to keep them close. You may find that your social life simplifies. Fewer calls, fewer texts, but deeper connections. Conversations that nourish instead of drain. Interactions that don't leave you questioning your worth, but confirming it. That's the fruit of frequency. And if new people haven't arrived yet, be patient. There's often a sacred pause between clearing and receiving. The soil must rest before it welcomes new roots. In that space, tend to your inner garden. The more rooted you are in your truth, the more naturally aligned energy will gravitate toward you. Gemini, this phase also calls for purpose realignment. Maybe you've been doing work that fits your resume but not your soul. Maybe you've been following a path that makes sense but leaves you emotionally malnourished. This is a time to ask, not what's impressive, but what's true. What work makes you forget the clock? What ideas keep visiting you in your quiet moments? What contributions feel like extensions of your spirit, not just transactions of your time? Don't panic if you don't know the full answer. Purpose doesn't always arrive as a thunderclap. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's simply a breadcrumb. One intuitive yes. One courageous no. One experiment in joy. Follow the current that feels alive, not the current that feels expected. For some Geminis, this shift may be subtle. For others, dramatic. Either way, the common thread is the same. You're no longer willing to participate in roles, jobs, or systems that mute your voice. You were born to speak, to connect, to move, to illuminate. Any space that punishes your light is not sacred. It is sacrificial. And you, Gemini, are no longer available for self-sacrifice. As you build this new life, remember, you're not chasing perfection. You're claiming alignment. That means your home doesn't need to be Instagram-worthy. It needs to be soul-worthy. Your relationships don't need to look ideal. They need to feel honest. Your work doesn't need to be validated by strangers. It needs to resonate in your chest. This is a season of refining what you say yes to. You've said yes to too much for too long, out of fear, guilt, hope, habit. Now your yes is sacred. And so is your no. Let every commitment become a mirror of your current truth, not a relic of your old survival. Gemini, as you consciously shape this new reality, resistance will arise, not just from others, but from within. The inner critic will whisper, "Who do you think you are?" Answer gently, "I'm who I've always been. I'm just no longer pretending otherwise." Some days you'll wobble. That's okay. You're undoing years of programming in moments of awareness. That takes courage. That takes grace. But even your missteps will land closer to your truth than your old people-pleasing dance ever did. And as this life begins to form around you, this life built on clarity, frequency, and intention, you'll notice something beautiful: ease. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you become unshakable. You stop over-explaining. You stop managing others' perceptions. You stop outsourcing your intuition. You live clean, clear, free. That is the gift of designing your life from your center. It won't look like anyone else's, and that's the point. It's not meant to be a copy. It's meant to be a signature. Gemini, you're not just rewriting your story. You're embodying a whole new narrative, one where your truth isn't an inconvenience, but a compass, one where your joy isn't conditional, but consistent, one where your presence doesn't shrink to fit the room, but expands to bless it. This is what happens when you stop living for applause and start living in alignment. Gate 5, leading your life with quiet power. Gemini, you arrived at the turning point that doesn't shout, it radiates. This is a phase where you stop pushing and begin magnetizing, where you no longer have to prove anything, because your alignment already speaks for you. You're no longer asking, what should I do? But declaring, this is who I am. The true revolution for you, Gemini, is not loud. It's deeply intentional. It's not about making noise. It's about making impact. And that impact begins the moment you stop looking outward for direction and start trusting the leadership that has quietly been growing inside you all along. For years, you may have been the one gathering information, exploring every perspective, listening more than asserting. And while those gifts gave you emotional intelligence and nuanced thinking, they sometimes came at the cost of your own clarity. But now, you've learned to discern when your openness becomes self-abandonment and when your curiosity needs to give way to conviction. This is the phase where you become the leader of your own life, not because of a title or platform, but because of embodiment. You lead not by instructing, but by living. You become the example, the mirror, the presence that shows others what it looks like to live from truth. Consider Asha, a Gemini sun who always led from the background. She facilitated, supported, connected, but she never called herself a leader. Until one day, a colleague said, "You don't need a mic. You already change the atmosphere just by being in the room." That was the moment she realized leadership isn't about spotlight. It's about frequency. And her frequency, now aligned, began to open doors she never had to knock on. Or think of Jordan, Gemini rising, who spent years people-pleasing his way through social dynamics, always being the fun one, the smart one, the reliable one. But inside, he felt invisible. After a year of deep self-work, he started saying fewer words, but each one carried weight. He stopped attending every gathering and started investing in intentional presence. His influence increased the moment he stopped trying to maintain it. Gemini, this is your portal into quiet power, the kind that doesn't need to dominate to be felt, the kind that doesn't convince, because it simply is. It's the confidence that comes from knowing you are aligned, not just in what you say, but in how you show up. So what does this leadership look like now? It looks like honoring your time without apology. It looks like saying no without over-explaining. It looks like expressing your truth even when your voice shakes. It looks like walking away from anything that dims your light, even if it once felt essential. It looks like making room for your future self, even if your past self resists. This phase of your evolution also transforms your relationship with fear. Before, fear whispered, "What if they don't like me?" Now, wisdom responds, "What if I keep betraying myself just to belong?" Before, fear asked, "What if I fail?" Now, your soul counters, "What if I keep shrinking just to stay safe?" You no longer let fear lead the conversation. You've invited your courage to speak first, and that shift changes everything. And yes, you may still feel the echoes of old patterns. There may be moments where you're tempted to perform, to doubt, to check in with others before checking in with yourself. But those moments will become fewer and quieter. Why? Because every time you act in alignment, you reinforce a new inner identity, one of trust, presence, and quiet command. Gemini, the truth is, you were never meant to be the psychic in your own story. You were born with a voice not just entertain or explain, but to illuminate. And now that you're no longer editing your truth to be more palatable, your life becomes a beacon. Not everyone will understand it, but those who do, they'll be drawn to you in ways that feel effortless and energizing. You're also learning that leadership isn't about control. It's about coherence. It's about walking your talk. It's about staying soft in spirit, but firm in boundary. It's about being deeply connected to your own compass, so you're not swayed by every passing opinion. And when conflict arises, and it will, you won't revert to pleasing or performing. You'll meet it with grace, speak with clarity, and act with discernment, not because you become hard, but because you become whole. This new level of inner leadership also begins to affect how others see you. You may notice that people listen more closely when you speak, even if you say less, that your presence feels more anchored. That opportunities arise not because you chase them, but because you stopped hiding from them. The paradox of power is this: the more you trust yourself, the less you need to convince anyone. The more grounded you become, the higher you rise. And finally, Gemini, the most powerful shift of all. You begin to feel safe in your own presence. You no longer abandon yourself in order to be accepted. You no longer twist your truth for temporary comfort. You no longer look outside to know how to feel inside. You've arrived. You're here. And from this moment on, you walk as someone who remembers that asterisk, nothing can stop you. Not because you're invincible, but because you're aligned. Conclusion: you are no longer waiting. You are becoming. Gemini, this isn't just a turning point. It's a soul reset. You've crossed through layers of awakening, through the fog of hesitation, the fire of decision, the silence of release, and the clarity of inner alignment. And now, you're no longer watching your life happen. You're shaping it, not through force, but through frequency, not through control, but through coherence. This journey wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about returning to the version of you that was always there, quietly waiting beneath layers of conditioning, roles, and borrowed expectations. And now, that version is no longer in hiding. They're leading. You are living differently now, not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. Not because you never doubt, but because you trust more than you fear. Not because you have all the answers, but because you stopped silencing your questions. And that Gemini is true revolution, the kind that doesn't need to shout. It simply resonates. So as you step into this next season, let yourself feel proud, not for how strong you had to be, but for how soft you allowed yourself to become in the process. That softness is your power now. That stillness, it's your new anchor. If this message echoed in your soul, if it confirmed what you already sensed, or revealed what you were just beginning to name, share it. In the comments below, let your truth find breath. What are you ready to choose? What are you done tolerating? What version of you are you finally ready to become? Your words could be the mirror that awakens someone else. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. Because this isn't the end of your journey. It's just the first chapter you're writing from your full power.